Do you know that Scots English College is the only college that teaches the Proncom course? Proncom focuses on the teaching of English pronunciation and communication, but that's not what just makes it unique, it's the teaching methodology that it uses, created by Scots CEO, Patrick Hayek. Patrick is not a native speaker of English. Yet, anyone that ever hears Patrick speak English takes him for an American and sometimes Canadian. And when people find out that, before the age of 21, Patrick had not even spoken a word of English, they're usually completely stunned. They're even more shocked when they know that Patrick is totally self-taught. Patrick's story and how he taught himself English have been a great inspiration to his students for over 14 years. Want to hear it? Patrick was born in a teeny-tiny country in the Middle East, called Lebanon, where Arabic is the first language. Because of wars and other reasons, Patrick never liked his country, and just as he finishes his bachelor degree in acting, he decides to migrate to Australia. The problem was that, to get his student visa, 1, he only had 6 months to pass a TOEFL test. 2, he didn't have enough money to study English at a college, and 3, he knew if he'd fail his English test, he'd have to be drafted into the military. Out of desperation, Patrick bought one novel, titled The Fountainhead, by Ayn Rand. He read the same novel 6 times, from cover to cover. Every time Patrick read the novel, he learned more words, and understood a grammar a little bit more. He fell in love with the story, which gave him the motivation to analyze the language so he can better understand the story and characters. Fortunately, 6 months later, Patrick sat the TOEFL test and passed it. His score was good enough to receive an offer letter from the university. And so Patrick got his visa, hopped on the plane, and flew to Sydney. His dream had just come true. However, Patrick's happiness did not last too long. In his very first week, as he was trying to catch a bus to campus, he asked the bus driver a question, but something strange happened. Although the bus driver spoke back in English, Patrick still couldn't understand a word the bus driver said. It was as if English was not English. It was just noise. It was only when the bus driver repeated the same sentence over 3 times, slowly, that he could understand a little. For Patrick, that was very disappointing. He thought his English was good, but it turned out it wasn't that good. He started to realize that the spoken English was very different from the written English. A couple of months after his arrival in Sydney, right before New Year's Eve, Patrick was invited to go camping with some of his Aussie classmates in Kiama. He didn't want to miss out on the opportunity of hanging out with mates and practicing English, so he accepted the invitation. What happened during that camping trip changed Patrick's life forever. While camping in Kiama, a bunch of young Aussies were having the best time of their lives. They were a bit drunk, joking, laughing and dancing. Only one person was sitting there with a fake smile on his face, pretending to understand what everyone else was saying, but actually had no idea what anyone was talking about. Feeling confused and frustrated, Patrick stood up, apologized to everyone, and left home. Patrick swore he would never go out with native speakers of English ever again, before he could speak English like they do. That night, on the way back home, he laid out a plan. The plan was for him to choose a rap song, and listen to it day in and day out, as many times as it took, to understand how English native speakers speak English, and then to speak the way they do. For 3 months, Patrick did nothing but listen to one of Eminem's songs, Lose Yourself, once again analyzing the sounds, and the way they're spoken. That became an obsession of Patrick. He kept listening to rap songs trying to sing along while using what he'd learned. He was getting more fluent and spoke faster, but most importantly, he noticed that he could now understand everything native speakers said. They were no longer too fast for him. He realized he hadn't been able to understand, not because they spoke fast, but because he heard slow. He was simply not trained in hearing the spoken English. A few months after all that hard work, Patrick had a job interview. It was his very first real job interview. Within the first 5 minutes of the interview, the manager asked Patrick a question that made him the happiest man in the world. He asked him, "Whereabouts in America are you from?" With a glowing smile, Patrick answered, "Never been there." After hearing Patrick's story, the manager was completely shocked. The story has shocked everyone who heard it ever since. Patrick's English learning method became a teaching method, changing the lives of hundreds of students. His method, known as BBR, is only taught in the Proncom course at SCOTS English College. BBR stands for Block, Build, and Rewire. The method does three things. 1. It blocks your old speaking habits, that is the impact of your first language on English. 2. It builds for you new speaking habits, by training your mouth and ears. And 3. It rewires your brain by creating new neural networks and new muscle memory. Patrick's main theory is that learning a language is a physical skill that needs loads of repetition. But repetition alone does not work in language learning. Repetition is only effective when old speaking habits are corrected and replaced with new speaking habits. The BBR method is life-changing because it gives you a new voice. And with a new voice comes more freedom, more confidence, and more career opportunities. So don't wait. Enroll in the Proncom course now, or simply book a trial lesson and see for yourself. See you at SCOTS.